So, YouTube is a weird and wonderful place, isn't it? And sometimes the weird and deprived decides to poke his head above the water. So today, let's take a look at some of those YouTubers that managed to build a following, but ultimately commit some of the worst crimes the platform has ever seen. This is the most heinous crimes committed by YouTubers, or people with channels, but you get what I mean. Before we get into it, take a little look at my Patreon, where you may even be the first member. Your name will be featured in every video going forward, but if that's not your cup of tea, then just smash like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. And by the way, you make sure you stick around so you can hear the comments from previous videos. So one's Elliot Rogers, arguably one of the more infamous school shooters in the modern era. But did you know that Elliot was actually the son of Peter Roger, who is a Hollywood filmmaker with a rather small filmography since the event? He's most known for working on the 2012 Hunger Games with Jennifer Lawrence. With Elliot's dad being fairly successful in his career, that meant that Elliot grew up in a fairly privileged and comfortable home, enjoying the finer things even. So what's Elliot's story, and how did he become the supreme gentleman, according to his supporters? Well, according to Elliot Rogers' manifesto, which spans a whopping 141 pages, where he outlines all of the reasons why he feels betrayed by the world and especially women in general. He explains that in his past he's been bullied by various girls from school, and that spurred him on to talk about the unfairness across the internet, which allowed him to build a community within the incel community. It wasn't all roses though, as being an incel you're always a punching bag for the internet, so he did receive hate from all over too, which probably didn't help his mental state. On the subject of mental health, it wasn't his first rodeo with mental illness. Being diagnosed with autism and being in and out therapy since the age of 8, he was essentially a loner and societal reject, which he felt was unfair. In his manifesto, which he emailed to 34 people from friends and family to his therapist, he discusses some earlier events where he shows extreme jealousy, from pouring coffee over a couple to throwing a cup over 2 college girls. He even tried to push some girls over a 10-foot ledge, where it ended up in a failure, hurting his ankle and being beaten up as a result. His whole demeanour is just odd. So what did he do? Well, I'm sure you've seen the famous Retribution video, but if you haven't, take a look.
Hi, Elliot Rogers here. Well, this is my last video. It all has to come to this. Tomorrow is the day of retribution. The day in which I will have my revenge against humanity. Against all of you.
Kind of eerie, right? Well, before this video was sent, he had already committed 3 separate murders, with 2 of the men being Elliot's roommates. George incurred 94 stab wounds alone, incredibly callous. After this had happened, Elliot buys a coffee from a local coffee shop and works on his laptop in his car at around 8:30 PM. And this is where he uploads a Retribution video and sends the manifesto at around 9:17 and 9:18 PM. With his parents racing towards Isla Vista from LA, he knew the time to act was soon. He drove to a sorority house and knocked on the door, but to no avail, so he simply turned around and started unloading on innocent pedestrians, killing 2 women and injuring another. He continued his rampage in his car and opened fire at a coffee shop, shooting a man 7 times fatally. He then drove on the wrong side of the road, hitting a person and shooting at several more, coming to a standstill when he met head to head with the sheriff, where they exchanged bullets. Despite this, he continued to drive on, hitting a skateboarder and shooting another 2 men. Elliot was then hit by a bullet in the hip by the police, where he lost control and crashed the BMW. Knowing there was no way out, he finally ended his own life with a single shot to the head. He had been carrying 3 pistols, knives and hundreds of rounds of ammo. In total, there were 6 murder victims and another 14 injuries caused by Elliot. Ultimately, it says a lot about mental health and the access to guns. Even despite knowing this 22-year-old man had a troubling history, he still managed to get his hands on firearms. Acting out his ultimate fantasy of a death rage, he was celebrated online by his incel friends, and this is where he gets his name, the Supreme Gentleman, which is a callback from his chilling Retribution video. Jared Lee Loughner was convicted on 19 charges of murder and attempted murder for what is known as the Tucson shooting back in 2011, even injuring US Representative Gabby Giffords and killing a district court judge named John Roll. But why and who is Jared? Jared grew up in a fairly private household, with his mum being a horticulturalist. and his father was a truck driver, so a seemingly normal setup for a family life. His behaviour started to change, even dropping out of high school early, and by 18, those around him had noticed differences about Jared. He was pretty anti-government and had some out there views, but didn't appear violent. Shortly after, during his college years, he was suspended, which led to him dropping out again. Jared then went on to buy a semi-automatic handgun, which would prove to be the first step to his plan. At the time, around the end of 2010 and at the start of 2011, he was working for a restaurant called Quiznos, where in the coming weeks his manager had noted a change, which once again led to Jared leaving. With another manager of a dog centre he used to work at saying that Jared couldn't understand or comprehend what he was telling him to do. A very odd sequence of events from Jared, right? Interestingly, Jared had actually been charged with 2 previous offences which were pretty minor, being drug possession and graffiti to a sign. Not really a red flag, but perhaps some foreshadowing for what is to come. Jared had actually struggled with substance abuse in his younger years, which probably had an effect on his mental state. Jared has some pretty wild political views, which can be seen on his frankly simple videos still on YouTube, where he has just over 3,000 subscribers. But most of his videos have him well over 1 million views due to the notoriety after the event. All of these events in Jared's life led to the fatal shootings that are now known as the Tucson shooting. And this is how that day went. In the hours before the attack, a cryptic message was left on a voicemail and posted a goodbye message on his MySpace. Following on from this, on the 8th of January 2011, Loeffner started his day by buying ammunition at a local Walmart near Foothills Mall at around 7 AM. He then went to a different Walmart and completed the purchase at 7:28 AM. Shortly after, at 7:34 AM, he was pulled over for a traffic violation but allowed to continue after a quick check. Loeffner then took a taxi to a Safeway market where Representative Giffords was meeting with constituents. There at 10:10, he opened fire, critically injuring Giffords and killing 6 others. The shooting also left 13 bystanders wounded, thus creating exactly what he wanted: United States history in his own words, sadly. After the shooting, Loeffner was apprehended by bystanders and arrested by the police. A chilling photo of his arrest was released, sparking national discussion, and so began a fairly lengthy trial, which included possible insanity plea, but in August 2012, Loeffner was deemed fit for trial and pled guilty to 19 counts, avoiding the death penalty. This plea included a $90 million restitution, or a $1 million per victim, and a lifetime sentence without parole, which resulted in a 140-year sentence. Though further appeals were waived, Arizona opted to not pursue additional charges. It's nice to know this scumbag will never see another day outside of a prison cell. This next story takes place in Finland, typically a place known for its happiness, but for whatever reason in 2008, 2 school shootings took place in the country, with the previous shooting happening all the way back in 1989. So who was the man behind the Kolhaki school shooting in 2008? Well, Matti Saari was a student in the school of Kolhaki, aged 22, with a short history intertwined with the military, where he spent just 1 month in there at the age of 20. He was expelled from the forces for starting an open fire in the woodland exercise, but this wasn't the first time Matti felt disappointment in his life, as reportedly he was relentlessly bullied in his secondary school, which led to Matti seeing a psychologist just before the event. He was quoted in saying, "I have always wanted to kill as many people as possible." If that ain't a red flag, I don't know what is. He was also known for his obsession with guns. His firearm interest led to him to start a YouTube channel where he would film himself firing handguns at a firing range, or specifically the Walter P22. Among his favourite videos, he had the footage from the infamous Columbine shooting. Therefore, an anonymous tip to the Finnish police: the Friday before the shooting, the police actually raided his house but couldn't find any reason to arrest him due to him having a temporary firearm licence. And he didn't have any criminal record besides a drink drive charge. So what happened on that day? At around 10:30, Matti entered the school through the basement and made his way to a classroom 10 minutes later, where he found 200 people from students to teachers, and this is where the shootings begun. The police were first told about the shooting at 10:46, actually after the shooting had stopped. he had only been shooting into the crowd for 6 minutes, stopping once to reload. During this reload, a teacher would try and prevent Saari from entering again, but unfortunately his bravery ended the teacher's life. After the classroom shooting claimed the lives of 10 people, he covered the room in petrol and set it ablaze, with the victims still in place, making it difficult for the authorities to identify the bodies, sadly. Running down the halls of the school and shooting obviously created noise, which led to some teachers and students to investigate, only to be met with a madman with a gun shooting blindly at them. Taking shelter in the classrooms around Matti, he decided to start throwing Molotov cocktails into other areas and shoot windows out to create further carnage. Some of the students were able to escape the school through windows and other exits, but found themselves at lockerheads with a river that runs alongside the school. Luckily there were rowboats dotted around, which they used to head downstream to avoid any more bloodshed. The firefighters extinguished the flames and Matti actually made it out and supposedly stayed on the school grounds for another 2 days after the shootings. A friend of Matti's received a call from him where he confessed it was in fact him that had been the active shooter, which wasn't known up till this point. So he rung his friend to essentially say goodbye. Matti was then found at 12:13 PM with a fatal gunshot to the head. Why did he do this? Guilt, shame, cowardice? Who knows? The only person who will ever know is Matti himself. The interesting thing about Finland and school shootings is that this was the 3rd school shooting ever committed in this country, which I guess to Matti is some kind of grim achievement that cements him into the wall of crime. So that's 3 of the stories committed in the most heinous crimes of YouTubers. But it is always important in these situations to always remember the victims, not so much the perpetrators. Now I am going to make this a 2-parter essentially because I had a good week and a half off for Easter. And I want to get out a video as soon as I possibly can for you guys. And with this video already being at 10 minutes, I didn't want to stretch out the upload dates and you all forget I exist. So I'm going to take a little spotlight on the comments as I usually do. And the first one from my previous video, The Dark Truth of Fake Medicine, is from Eldritch Axolotl. And they say, channel's so good I had to unsubscribe so that I can subscribe again. Dude, when you do unsubscribe, please remember to resubscribe because your boy needs that 1k right now. But thanks for the comment. The second comes from One Rowan and he says, W video, these kinds of well edited videos and content will get you to the millions. Cheers Rowan, I'm sure 1 million is right around the corner. Man. But hey man, thanks for the support. Lastly, we have 3 long timers on my community post. Hack E444, who has a crazy good channel talking about anything that crosses his mind, kind of like me really. We have Quacky2, who has supported this channel to the next level, and NFW40, who has been with us for like over a year now. So thank you to all 3 of you guys and to everyone else who has continued to support the channel with a view, like or comment. Don't forget to check out Patreon and I also have a PayPal donation link in case you do want to support the channel. So anyway, I'm going to leave it there for today and I am working on part 2 as we speak. I hope to see you all there and I hope you all had a good Easter, even though that was probably like 3 or 4 weeks ago now anyway. But I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.